Imagine working 100-hour weeks in finance only to realize you're meant for something entirely different. In this episode of My Perfect Failure, Petre Grainger, co-founder of CaféPod, shares how one life-changing piece of advice led him from hedge funds to creating one of UK's favourite coffee brands. So stay tuned to hear how following your passion can change everything.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I'm super excited as I have another fantastic guest for you. So my guest today is the co-founder of Café Pod, pioneers of the Nespresso-compatible pod, based in London. He was born and raised in Cape Town, opting for a non-traditional path. He then pursued higher education through correspondence at the University of South Africa while working full-time in bars and restaurants. Later, he moved to Dublin, where he worked in the hospitality before transitioning to the financial sector, working at institutions such as Investec, Citigroup, Merrill Lynch, and Aspect Capital, eventually taking on a role at GLG Partners, a hedge fund in London. This is where I believe he eventually met his business partners and embarked on his adventure with Café Pod. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Petre Grainger. How are you, Petre?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Excited to have a bit of a chat about the many failures along the way.
Well, failures to me is like ingredients for success. So I'm not encouraging everybody to have multiple failures, but I think we shouldn't run away. I think we should, when they happen, it's like, where's the learning? Where can I go for that? Because there always is. And I think, to me, successful and ambitious people fail. If we don't have any ambition, and if we're not looking to push the boundaries, then it's unlikely we're gonna fail. So I think failing invariably means that we're on to something. So that's my vantage point. So just to give everybody a bit of context. So I went to an event, I think it was this year, and it was a really good event. There was lots of entrepreneurs and founders there and business people. And I went to a talk of entrepreneurs and Petre was there. Petre was doing a guest talk for the event. I think it was in central London or the city, something like that. And I was like, wow. I was captivated because I think sometimes when you go to these talks, I don't know what it's like for you, Petre. I always enjoy the events, but when I listen to particularly founders, particularly people with experience, you get that when you get the authenticity and you can feel the journey, you can understand the journey, and it becomes real. And with you, I got that immediately. So I just thought, you know what, I need to maybe see if I can speak to Petre. And as the event finished, you probably won't remember this, but somebody else accosted you for a conversation, and I thought, okay, I don't want to interrupt because it felt like the guy was quite keen to extract information with you. And so I just thought, okay, let me give it a while. Okay, I actually ended up walking away, and then I came back, and that I saw that conversation was nearing the end. So I just thought I'd stick around. We had a little chat, and then we've been on email ever since. And hey, presto, we're here today.
A little bit of persistence goes a long way in business. It's one of the big lessons you learn. Well, a lot of persistence, actually.
Yeah. So I was persistent, and I'm really pleased that we're here today. So I guess what I was keen to do is for people that obviously I read out a little bit of your bio, but that's obviously just like a a shrink wrapped version. So what I didn't know, I should have gleaned this from your accent. So you're born in Cape Town,
South Africa, yeah.
Okay, and eventually you find your way to Europe. But what was going on there? So you ended up in the financial sector, but there was a journey to get to that point. So it'd be lovely to maybe get a taste of what that journey was like and how it unfolded.
Sure. So so I grew up in Cape Town in South Africa, arguably one of the best cities in the world, and did probably 2 or 3 years of what you'd call a normal job. First job out of university. I'd kind of when I was studying full time and then also working full time, and I was very fortunate that my mom is Irish, so having an EU passport gave me the option of traveling if I wanted to, or going to Europe. And when you're down at the tip of Africa, everywhere feels very far away. I mean, it's quite difficult to comprehend. You know, when you're in places like Australia and South Africa, the nearest, well, for us, the nearest kind of European or Western country is 10 to 12 hours away. So just getting some exposure and just seeing what's on the other side of the world was always a bit of a pull. So I decided to use what I had because many people didn't have it. So it'd be a bit of a waste not to use it. So decided to head to Dublin. Lots of family there, so decided to start off there. Wasn't particularly interested in coming to London. Seemed like from the outside quite a dreary, miserable place. So I thought Dublin's a good place to start, and lived there for 2 years. Did a couple of months behind some bars before I found a job in the financial sector, very entry level. That's where I kind of started on the journey in Europe. And then after about 2 years, went to visit a family member in London and just remember being blown away by, it was summer in London. I was like, wow, this place is incredible. What has everybody been going on about? This is just, why would you not want to be here? So very quickly, I realized that actually London was the place I wanted to be and made plans to come over here. And that was 21 years ago. And then, arrived in London, didn't really have a career path as such. I worked in financial services, so obviously London's a pretty big financial center of the world. Applied for some jobs and off I went, but I kind of didn't really particularly have a direction, didn't really know how long I wanted to be here. I mean, like a lot of South Africans, we all come here for 2 years to earn a bit of money so we can travel, and 20 years later, there's a lot of us still here. But yeah, there wasn't some grand plan. It was just a case of, seeing what worked, what I enjoyed. Some places I liked better than others, but eventually it kind of led me to work in an environment with a lot of very high caliber people, and made a lot of incredible friends at this hedge fund called GLG. And that's when I met Brent and Simon, who I ended up setting up Café Pod with.
So you moved to London. And I guess you're working in the financial sector. Did you enjoy the financial sector?
Yeah, I think the challenge of it is great, and the people you work around are great. London attracts a certain type of person, especially with a particular industries, that a particular city will be known for. So you get to work with some high caliber people from all around the world, which is great. Any nationality you can think of, and you're working with those people. So the exposure you get is amazing. You work with some of the biggest businesses in the world. So again, that kind of exposure, considering, if you come from somewhere like South Africa, these companies don't exist there. So that is almost kind of just being like a fly on the wall, just watching this all happen and being involved in it was pretty amazing. Yeah, I kind of just jumped into it. It's not afraid of some hard work. And we worked, if you work in financial services, like a lot of industries, you work long hours. So you just get good at just putting your head down and just go. Yeah, I loved it. It's challenging, always something new going on. I was working in financial services when the 2008 crash hit, so that made things interesting. Yeah, and then I finished up about 18 months, 2 years after that. I was like, right, I think this is probably a good time to step out, take a few months out and see what I want to do next.
And just from doing a bit of background research for this, after that 2008 crash, I guess everybody, particularly if you worked in the financial sector, it was almost like a watershed moment. I guess lots of layoffs and lots of people thinking about transitioning and thinking about what next. I know that you embarked on a trip around South America and Central America. Maybe you can elaborate on why that trip and what that did for you, where that led you to go.
Sure. I think I was quite comfortable in what I was doing. I mean, we were working probably 100 hours a week, so it was pretty full on. But I love the people I work with. I love the work. But my boss, who I got on very well with, turned around to me one day and said, "You're drifting. What do you want? What do you want to do?" And I'm actually quite thankful for him for saying that to me, because it kind of made me step back and go, what do I want? When days start to be a little bit the same, months start to be a bit the same, and you just kind of get comfortable, or you stick with what you know. And that comment from him made me step back and go, you know what, actually, maybe it's time I step out and look at what the next phase is. So that's when I decided, right, I'm going to take some time out. I'm going to do some traveling, which I'd never done before. I was probably kind of early 30s at this time. So I decided to join some friends, and they were traveling around South America for a couple of weeks. So I joined them, and then I kind of continued by myself, and I pretty much spent 6-7 months traveling around South America, then Central America, then a bit of the US. So just kind of seeing where the wind blows and exploring, and that was an adventure of a lifetime. And then ended up in going to a friend's wedding back in Cape Town, and I was there for a couple of weeks, and that's when I saw someone actually selling their own coffee in pods that worked in an Nespresso system that they had created themselves. So more out of curiosity than anything else. I mean, I like coffee the same way anybody likes coffee. And I just went to chat to this person and just asked them a bunch of questions, because I actually wanted to buy some of the products. It was more curiosity about the products. And that just kind of ignited something in my mind. And actually, this was the end of probably an 8-month trip. And this was the last. I went to lunch at a restaurant, and this shop was across the road from a restaurant. And from that restaurant, I was then going to where I was staying, picking up my bags and going to the airport to get on a plane back to London. So it was literally in the last hours of an 8-month trip that I came across this. And when I got back to London, we just started chewing over this idea, or this, what I had seen with the two people who were very close friends and who ended up being the co-founders of CaféPod. So it's amazing how things happen.
Totally. So when you came up, when you had that chance interaction at the wedding, saw this coffee set up, and then it sparks an idea, how does it then turn into you setting up a business? Because I guess you probably have to do research, and then you have to think, where do I start? Because I guess you were going from a corporate career, a corporate environment, to something that I guess there was some synergies, definitely the hard work, the 100 hours a week. I'm sure there's some relationship there in long hours, but I guess this is your baby. You're having to set it up. You're having to do all the research. There isn't sort of a foundation that underpins it. You're actually having to create the foundations yourself. What was that process like in the beginning?
In the beginning, it was myself and another guy, Simon, who would just meet up and talk about this concept or this idea, and but it was no different to, I'm sure plenty of people listening have had these great ideas, and they chat to friends and, over meals or beers or whatever, and like, oh my God, we should do this, we should do that, this is great. And you kind of spitball this idea, and we were just chatting about it. And I think one of the tests is, does the idea fade away, or does it persist? And we were exploring it more and more and more, and we'd been talking about it probably for a couple of months, but we hadn't actually we'd started doing a bit of research online, but nothing more than that. We were just kind of exploring. And then we effectively went out for dinner with another close friend, Brent, and the three of us, so Petre's chatting, and then Brent was basically like, what are you guys talking about? What is this thing you're going on? So we're explaining to him, and he was actually the target consumer, whereas two of us were not target consumers. So we were effectively hypothesizing about this opportunity, whereas he was the only one out of three of us that actually had one of these Nespresso machines at home, understood the challenges, and he was just like, this is genius, we absolutely needs to happen. And he was the one who actually turned around and said, right, we're doing this, and Simon, we're going to your house tomorrow, we're setting up a bank account, and we're setting up a company, and we're doing it. And actually, that was the catalyst from going from an idea to actually making it a business. So it took somebody to take action, and many ideas are spoken about, but somebody, pushed it and went, no, this is good enough to be a business. Let's go. And that's really what started it off as a business. And that's how we got going.
Okay. So I can't remember if it's you and I that spoke. I think we spoke about a few books prior in another conversation, and the E-Myth Revisited.
Yes, the E-Myth, yeah.
Yeah, so you might have put me onto that. But the reason I mention that is because there is this myth that entrepreneurs are just born, they just arrive. And this kind of explores the idea that I think it's E-Myth Revisited, that invariably it's something happens that gets you thinking, leads us to making different decisions. And the reason I mention that, because I'm thinking about that conversation you had with your boss at work that got you to go on that holiday to maybe think, and then it led to different domino effects that happen later on. So nice to kind of, for people listening that may think that you have to be born an entrepreneur, could be just something happens. It could be you're unhappy at work, or it could be that you just have that itch.
I think the timing of all these conversations makes a difference, because things cross our paths every day, multiple times a day, that we can either just choose to watch go by or choose to react to. And I'm sure, if I reference back to that comment that my old boss made, I'm sure 50 other comments were made from other people in the preceding year that I equally could have reacted to, but the timing was probably right, where I actually listened to it, and then it caused my path to go in a different direction. And the same with, the shop that I went to see, in Cape Town, where I saw this person doing, having made their own pods and coffee. Like, I could have just been like, oh, that's nice, can I buy some? And walked out and never given it. But I was coming to the end of this trip. I was like, what am I going to do? Like, do I want to go back to London? Do I want to go back to finance? So I was open to this. And then equally, in the conversation I've just explained, we again could have been chatting but not really ready, or somebody could have said, yes, let's do this. And all of us could have been like, I'm going away, or I'm busy. So sometimes, timing, you've got to be open to these things. And then the ability to just think about, well, what happens if it, and I think this is one of the big challenges. And to your point about entrepreneurs being made or born or whatever it is, I think it's about how you see the world and your approach to risk. And do you see things from a point of view of what could happen if this goes wrong versus what could happen if it goes right? And I think if you're looking for something, if you're looking to solve a problem, you're always looking for what's going to solve this problem, not what's going to make the problem worse. So if you're looking for an opportunity, or what am I going to do next in my life, as opportunities appear, you're looking, going, could this solve? So if I had been in a very risk-averse mindset, going, that doesn't sound very safe, but it's having this positive approach and attitude, going, that sounds exciting, and actually maybe there could be something there, and not thinking too much about it, just kind of almost going with your gut and just being, right, let's go for it.
Totally. And you raise an interesting point as well, because there are those, going back to that comment your boss made at that time, and we do have those innocuous things that people say, or moments that we have, or coincidences that we have, and some of those in milliseconds they're gone, we forget about, but there are just those moments that resonates. We just, obviously, not sure when this will come out, but it's probably a month after the Olympics. We've just had the Olympics, and I saw a quote by the American former Olympian, but competed years and years ago, Carl Lewis. He said that life is all about timing. So it's about those moments where things happen and things collide, and then we just take the initiative based on what's happened. So just to give us some context around what Café Pod is, if you wouldn't mind explaining that for people that want to fully understand what your product is and what you guys do.
Sure. I mean, we're a coffee company, so we sell a great range of coffee, available in pods and beans and ground coffee. I suppose ultimately every business is about solving a problem, because if you don't solve a problem, why do you exist? And I think the problem we've solved has morphed and changed over time. I think one of the biggest things we've kind of learned and got into is is one of the biggest problems out there is people struggle to find coffee that they just really, really, really like. And when I say like, as in not the idea of it, but when they take a sip of that coffee, they're like, oh, that is just good. And you think it'd be easy to find that, but it's not as easy as people think. So through us being around for 12, 13 years, we've been developing our coffees just to solve that problem better and better, to the point where actually that's probably the biggest problem we solve in our coffees now. Originally you couldn't get pods in supermarkets, and you could only buy Nespresso coffees. So we kind of, the concept of the business was born from that idea and that opportunity to solve that problem for the consumer, going, I really want to drink coffee from my Nespresso machine, but I really can't get hold of it. If I don't live in London, I have to travel to London to one of the stores, or I have to buy online, but then there's all these other barriers. So we kind of leaned into this market that was opening up, and went, actually, let's provide a great choice of coffees and put them where most people do their shopping, which is in supermarkets. But through that process, we've developed this incredible range of coffees that now, whenever people try our coffees, I'm just waiting to watch their expression on their face, because they're quite shocked at, oh, this is what I've been looking for. Do you drink coffee?
I do. I do. I guess what I'm trying to say is that where I am now, at my cousin's place, and their sisters, they're real coffee aficionados. So if I reference a coffee that is maybe run of the mill, I'm told in no uncertain terms. So, and I understand that there is people that like their coffee do long to have a very, very nice coffee. And if you give them coffee, or if you want to go to a coffee shop where it's, I guess, below par, naming no names, it really takes away the experience, because it really impacts their day. It's a core component of their day. And if you serve them or go to somewhere where the coffee, it could be at home, it could be going out for a coffee somewhere, actually, probably for them, today's not going to be the best day, because the coffee is a core ingredient. So in a roundabout way, I do drink coffee, but I need education on coffee. I'm probably not around a coffee aficionados.
I would say you're as educated as you need to be, in terms of, if you drink a coffee and it tastes amazing to you and it makes you happy, then in my opinion, that's as much as you need to know. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, where, coffee sets a lot of people's days up. Your day can be made or broken by how good a cup of coffee is in the morning. And we learned this very early on, and it's effectively been reinforced over the last 12 years, how many people's mornings just get ruined, and how disappointed they are with this expectation of this coffee. And they're just like, oh, this is not great. Like, it can't be that hard to have a great tasting cup of coffee. So we really doubled down on that, and went, actually, let's create a range of coffees that at its core, for the UK coffee drinker, tastes amazing, so that they can get to a point where they have a coffee and they are, their day is just off to a great start. They become morning people, effectively, So, because once you've had a great cup of coffee, you can kind of take on the world, and the opposite is true if you don't. So, and it sounds like quite a simple thing, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to get right.
So tell me about your research. What was the process like, working out what a nice or an amazing coffee needs to taste like? Was that, tell me about that. I'm curious to know.
There's only one person who can tell you what a great cup of coffee tastes like, and that's the customer. And in food and drink, I think it gets forgotten far too often that the person, well, actually in business, the customer is the boss, and they are the ones who will define what makes them happy, and when you are hitting it out of the park or not. And so for us, and I think one of the advantages we had was not coming from coffee. We kind of saw it from a consumer point of view, so we didn't have any preconceived notions of, oh, this makes a coffee better, or that makes a coffee better, or because there's plenty of processes and ingredients and all this kind of stuff that can contribute. But at the end of the day, really what counts is, when I take a sip of that coffee, does it taste amazing? Do I light up because I'm like, wow? And that's kind of where we started. And we learned that early on. We had a couple of people give us some really good advice about the types of coffees people like. People like a rich, strong cup of coffee. Now, it doesn't have to be bitter. Bitterness plays a role. People talk about bitterness like it's bad, but if bitterness was bad, then nobody would eat dark chocolate. But there's a role for it to play there in contrast with other experiences. And so we learned early on in our journey what resonates with the UK palate, because every country has its nuances with any food: tea, coffee, wine. Some nations like it sweeter, some like it more bitter, some like it. So it just depends. But ultimately, we kind of stood back and went, what makes people happy? And it took us a long time to nail it. And the great thing about having your own business and getting direct feedback from your consumers is they will tell you in no uncertain terms if you've got it right or wrong. And I remember I used to do customer service for the business in the early days. We learned very, very early that coffee plays such an incredible role in people's lives. And by trying a different coffee, there's a risk being taken by somebody, because they might have the coffee that they like, but for some reason they're looking to change. They go, oh, this sets my day up. It's a bit of a risk trying another coffee. If I get this wrong, my day is ruined. And we had plenty of people who try it, and for a number of reasons it didn't work, and you'd swear we killed their firstborn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the kind of responses, and what it did, it cemented in our minds how important it was for us to understand what the customer says is a great cup of coffee. So we really honed in, and we used to do a lot of sampling and just standing there and pouring coffees and giving them away and asking people and talking to people and listening to the questions that they asked. And after thousands of interactions with the consumers, you end up with a handful of things that people say over and over and over and over, and you'll be like, okay, right, so these are the biggest fears or the biggest things people like. So it's not rocket science in a way. Like a restaurant, if you made food that nobody liked, you wouldn't be open for very long. So these are kind of back to basics, and I'd say any food product or brand, if your actual product isn't out of this world, it's going to be hard to keep it going long term.
So did you guys start from the premise that that there was a problem?
Yeah.
And then did you guys think about how can you solve the problem? Or did you think about, is anybody else solving a problem? Or was it a combination of both of those, just in terms of how you got started?
So we looked at this, and at the time, the patents for the Nespresso, some of the patents, because there's many of them, were coming to an end, and they were becoming public knowledge. And so effectively there was this multi-billion-dollar market opening up. And for the record, Nespresso does an incredible job. I'm a big fan of the brand, of the products they make. Like, I think they've done an incredible job in terms of bringing high-quality coffee to the consumer globally, and really kind of bringing in that wave of coffee, especially for countries like the UK, which haven't traditionally had that at home. But there was an exclusivity to it, which meant the consumer had to reach quite far to access it. So there was this almost not quite a consumer. The consumer-centric part of it had moved slightly away from the customer, because if you're really customer-centric, you'd make it available. It was almost turning more into a luxury product than an everyday product. And I think coffee is an everyday, every man, every woman product that should be enjoyed by everybody, and shouldn't be seen as a luxury and an accessory. So we saw this opportunity to kind of create something more accessible in terms of brand, just not too exclusive, but also opening up the ways you can access it. So you don't have to traipse off and sacrifice half your day just so you can get good coffee at home. It's like, well, I'm going shopping in Tesco, Waitrose, Sainsbury's, and I'll pick some up while I'm there, just like everything else in my house. So that was really the big customer opportunity and problem that we saw. If we solve that, we could create a business to solve that, and then also introduce some more accessible coffees, just something different. You know, if you'd owned a machine for 10 years, you would have been drinking the same coffees for 10 years. So just some choice. And that was really the premise of at least how we started off thinking about it. And it was enough for us to get going effectively. And sometimes when you reflect back on what you thought when you started the business, you're like, what were we thinking? Like, we didn't think through this, we didn't think through that, but it's kind of irrelevant, the naivety, but the sheer enthusiasm and the belief in the opportunity just drives you forward.
And I guess that a lot of the learning we have, because we can't know until we start, we just can't know everything. And it's with that knowledge, with the growth, it's with the education, it's with the feedback that we get from our customers that we realize that we could do things slightly different. But I guess there's always got to be a starting point, which is always at the beginning. So for people that are thinking about your brand and how they can access it, and maybe a point of direction for you, were you trying to make it more great coffee, more accessible, and for the everyday person? Because sometimes when you think about coffee, maybe, I don't know whether you found this in your research or whether in your interaction. So great coffee, great tasting coffee, sometimes it can be a little bit aloof, it can be a little bit over there, and it's not really accessible maybe to the mainstream. Maybe people like me, I put myself in that category. Were you looking to solve that challenge and really make it accessible to people that
to be honest, I mean, it's easy for me to kind of look back and fill in the gaps, but in reality, we were three people from a finance background, and we saw this opportunity, but we knew nothing about branding. I mean, literally nothing. And so we didn't so that wasn't the problem. We kind of knew we wanted more choice, and we wanted that accessibility from a distribution point of view. But other than that, we didn't really think from a brand point of view, we hadn't even thought about that. And so that almost came second. And in hindsight, that's one of the big mistakes was actually we didn't realize the role of brand, how you position it, all these things that some people would naturally just think of in the beginning. We didn't think about that. And that has come back to bite us because we've had to kind of figure it out as we've gone along. But this is part of the stuff you kind of don't know everything, and you don't even know what you don't know. You know, things like we set up, we bought our own manufacturing equipment. We literally committed £500,000 to buy production equipment. And we didn't even have a factory to put it in. But we thought we'd just hire a warehouse and stick it in there and hire a few people, and off we went. And so we didn't even have the foggiest idea, health and safety and food safety standards and running a food factory. But we went and put a deposit down and ordered a machine, which is the size of a small bus, before we even looked at premises. I mean, like I say that as a so just to give you an indication of what we had thought about and what we hadn't thought about. But when you're setting off, you only know what you know. But now, I think the more you do this, the more you realize, the more experience you get, the more you realize how little you know. But you know that you don't know. When you're starting off, you're pretty confident and you're like, thought of everything. And it still gets you going.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that the role of or the journey of an entrepreneur is not a straight one. It ups and downs, and very an interesting journey. So tell me a little bit about what you think about the mindset of an entrepreneur. Is there a mindset of an entrepreneur? Do you think differently when you get up to go to work as an entrepreneur than you did when you worked in a financial sector in a very high level businesses and in corporate environment?
I think that the word entrepreneur is a little bit, it's taken on a different meaning. So if I kind of set that aside and kind of, because there's people who own their own businesses, and ultimately all businesses are set up to solve a problem. I feel like almost entrepreneur is kind of the speed at which you want to solve that problem. But that in itself is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. But so I think the mindset, and this is just from my own experience, is when you work for somebody else, when you leave a job, it depends on the role, you tend to kind of leave it behind at the office. Now, I haven't worked for somebody for 13 years. And if I go back 13 years ago, nobody worked from home. even laptops in the office environment were kind of a new thing. Most computers were desktops. I mean, the first iPhone had only just come out, so this was the world of Blackberries. So in a large way, when you left the office, you had no physical way of working from home, so taking your work home. So it gave you that break not to think about things. So my comparison is now about, when you have your own business and you're trying to build something, it's not just a job, it's something that you're passionate about. It's a problem you're trying to solve. And I almost think of building a business as just one big challenge with multiple components that you're just constantly trying to solve. It's like one big project, and you're iterating and you're iterating, and it's like climbing a mountain that just, there is no top, and you're just constantly, each step is just something new, and you eventually get into this mode of just that's what you do. You're solving things, so you're always in this problem solving mindset, because you're always trying to overcome things, because most of the things you don't know until you get there. And I think some people would have already had that mindset just through the current roles they do in businesses. So actually sets them up perfectly to be an entrepreneur or run their own business. I think it's the things like getting very used to dealing with ambiguity. I think that's probably one of the biggest, and through being comfortable with ambiguity, you kind of learn to back yourself. You have this, so you're kind of like, I really don't know what to do here, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. And some people will see a situation and be like, oh my God, like we're doomed. But a lot of times an entrepreneur will be like, we've done this 1,000 times. There is a solution somewhere. We'll figure it out. And they kind of back themselves to, even though they can't see the solution, they know somehow they'll pull on resources or people, because there's no new problems. So you'll find somebody who's already solved that problem. So you get good at being resourceful. And I think that mindset you definitely develop, but some people will have that naturally. So the step into entrepreneurship is not a big thing. And unfortunately, whether it's schools or the university system, you don't learn that. You don't learn there's either no right answer or there's multiple right answers. You come through the system thinking there's a wrong and a right way. And the people I've seen struggle a lot in entrepreneurial businesses are the people who hold on to that, oh, this is wrong and this is right. And it's like, that's not how life works. And if you hold on to that because you want to be sure about things, that's when the journey is not.
That mindset about fixed mindset, growth mindset, fixed mindset, right or wrong, black or white. If it doesn't fit into either of those categories, then if it doesn't fit into that category, then we don't move forward because we can't see any way that it possibly can happen. So I guess you've answered it slightly, but not slightly, you've answered it fully, but just in terms of the challenges that you guys have encountered over the years, and is it that approach that has enabled you to move beyond those? Because I can imagine not just your business, but any business that an entrepreneur has, certainly the people that I've spoke to, whether it be on the podcast or I've met at conferences or I've just met as part of my friendship group, they encounter any number of different challenges with their business, and some cope better than others. I guess you're saying that you've learned to process and know that I might not know now, but at some point we will figure it out.
Yeah, I think you realize that it's kind of playing whack-a-mole. You deal with one problem and 4 others pop up, and you can't freak out about, oh, there's 4 new problems. You always got to think there are going to be tomorrow 4 new problems. So you kind of accept and you go with it. And I think one of the things we learned in the early days was, as we were setting the business up and we were trying to talk to supermarkets and then get products listed, we would react quite extremely to any communication we got. So if we got an email, we were on top of the world. If they hadn't replied in 2 days, we were like depressed. And so you end up going on this emotional roller coaster with every small little thing. And it's exhausting. And I think what we realized is like, whoa, we need to separate ourselves from, we can't be reacting to the highs, but equally as much, and we can't be equally reacting to the lows. And you try and develop the skill where you have this range of emotion that kind of sits a bit more in the middle. So when things are going well, you're like, yeah, that's great. And you appreciate it, but you know that it can be temporary, it can be permanent, but don't get too carried away. And equally, if something's gone wrong, you're like, it happens. See what we can do, because you just try and manage yourself because you realize the game is very long. And if you burn that emotional energy, and I think that's why a lot of people just run out of steam because it's hard, and you kind of need to, when bad things happen, is not see them happening to you. You're gonna see them over there and be like, okay, that's not great. We run out of money, or we just lost a customer, or somebody's resigned, or the production was wrong and they've had to throw it all away. Okay, that's not ideal. So what do we do? And just trying to, and it's not easy, but trying to adopt that mindset allows you just to think creatively and right, how do we deal with this? Because there's always solutions to things. They might not be perfect, but there's always options to solve things.
Yeah, I can imagine. Tell me about what it's like for, because we're talking a lot about you and the entrepreneurship environment and the skills that you have, that we have to develop, mindset, resilience, and I love the idea of being solution orientated, that eventually there might be a problem here, but eventually there is a solution. We will get it. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next week, but it's coming. We will figure it out. But what is it like with family and friends who aren't in that entrepreneurial? They might have day jobs, and their jobs might be challenging, but very different from what goes on in your life from a day-to-day basis. Do you have to keep that separate because maybe they can't process the everyday challenge that an entrepreneur has, and maybe if they don't see a business in a supermarket immediately, if it's a product, if they don't see it, a write-up in a certain noted publication, it's difficult for them to see, well, why don't they just do something which is go back to a Citigroup or something like that?
I think it depends on, I think most people have almost got different subsets of people in their group of friends, and some people who will relate to, maybe they own their own businesses, so you can chat to them about that, or would like to. I found personally, there hasn't been too much of a challenge in terms of those conversations about, I'm not sure if you're kind of talking about like relating to people, working in this environment versus a non-entrepreneurial environment. I think people have been quite good at being supportive. Well, more than good, amazing at being supportive. I think they've backed us, and we've been doing this for a long time. They wouldn't necessarily want to do it, but I think they appreciate. I think it depends how you talk about what you do, and if you're passionate about it, and if you're just the worst person to be around all the time, then I can see why people be like, why don't you just go back to getting a job? I mean, your life seems terrible. But then there's the flip side of having the hardest day ever, but still loving what you do. And because you're trying to move towards this bigger thing and kind of keeping your eye on that. So you're being beaten down every day, and it's just week and month and year after year, but you're kind of like, but you still believe. So you can actually still talk about it positively, and still, when you talk about it, still get back to in the bigger scheme of things, so in my example, I make coffee that people love, and I get to hear every day from people who go, oh my God, I had one of your coffees. It was incredible. So puts all of it in perspective. And I think if you've got that balance, but if you're just doing it, for example, there are easier ways to earn money. I think that's probably something to say. There are much easier ways to earn money. If you are only looking to earn money or get rich, this is not the ideal route. You've got to be passionate. You've got to be passionate about people, whether it's people you work with them, who work for you, who are trying to help deliver this vision. You've got to love your customers. And hopefully, if you do an incredible job on those fronts, then a byproduct is your business grows and grows, and there is something that you're building for the long term. But you've got to have something that fires you up on the inside, or else you will be a misery to be around.
So tell me about So you've got two co-founders.
Yep.
So tell me about that dynamic there. So I guess there's two things I have in mind. One is the selection, because I can imagine that there's founders that go into business together and it doesn't work out because for any number of different reasons. So founder selection, I guess, is important. Plus also, I was reading a book recently, I forget what it's called, but it talks about founders, and sometimes within that dynamic, you'll have one that might be more of a visionary. They might see the big picture and they can see the evolution of the big picture. And then you might have other founders within a business that are more about the building process, about, you know, moving it from this stage to this stage, but more in a I guess a building capacity. How does that work for you guys, or does that evolve, or is it very much a scenario that it's all blended together nicely?
It's funny, like when you've set up a business with other people and over a longer period of time, I think one of the things that when you set up a business, you don't expect to learn about, but it's a super valuable life lesson, is how partnerships work. And whether it's from a work point of view or relationships, whether you're getting married, you actually learn about, because setting up a business for somebody else, you see that person, you spend more time with that person than anybody else, including your girlfriend or your husband or your wife or whatever it is. And it's pretty intense. So you learn about the dynamics of people. And so there were three of us that set the business up. And the first person who left was Simon. And and to his credit, kind of recognized, hey, this is a path I could take, and there's a couple of paths for me. And I'm not sure this is long-term the best path for me. I'm super supportive of this whole thing, but this other path is the path that I want to go on. And it's actually worked out amazing for him. Massive support of the business. I mean, he was over on the weekend for a barbecue, like super close friends still. But there's a lot of courage in making that decision early on, and on reflection, absolutely the right decision for him. So myself and Brent built the business and effectively for 10 years. And what's interesting is the dynamic there. So to your question, we didn't think of anything about the dynamics of co-founders. Like, is this going to make a good unit? Have we got a balance of skills, which if you were building a management team or if I was going to do it again, I'd be more aware of that. But in the beginning, there's just a bunch of you, whether it's 2 people or 5 people, who go, this is a great idea, we should do this. Let's go. And to be honest, you either get lucky or you don't. I think to commit at that point, you probably know the person well enough to kind of feel confident that you could work with them. I mean, both the people that I started CaféPod with were close friends. We had worked together very intensely in the previous company. So we were used to being just under intense pressure, working 14, 16 hours a day, go. So we'd already worked a kind of a pressured environment together. So we almost understood that dynamic, which I think on reflection helped. And then, I mean, to be honest, when we first started the business, we were like, right, Simon, you know about finance, so you can be CFO. Peter, it was your idea, so you can be CEO. And Brent, that leaves COO, right? You're CEO, right? And that was as much thinking as it went into it. And you tend to, in a way, grow into the roles. The dynamic between myself and Brent was great. I think when you, on reflection, my 2 cents worth is what makes a good partnership in whatever sense is, do you have a shared path? Do you have a shared vision? Are you working in unison towards the same greater goal? And I think if you do, then you can have the biggest arguments in the world and debates and get fiery with the confidence that both of you want the same thing. And I think so Brent and I used to go at it all the time and just like debate it, but not be scared about putting our points across. But eventually we would settle because we're like, well, we both want the same thing. So the moment something came out that went, that's what gets us there, didn't matter whose idea it was for the greater good, which was incredible. So we quite got good at this, just quite lively debating and challenging and arguing, which makes a massive difference. Massive difference. Yeah. So incredible partnership, and then Brent's again, once your paths start moving in different directions. Brent's wife was Australian. They were from the get go when we first set up Café Pod. He was like, "We are going to at some point move back to Australia. Who knows?" And that time eventually came, and it was like it's the natural point. The paths change, and he's in Australia now, and still an active contributor to the business in terms of from a board level. I chat to him on a regular basis. But yeah, the partnerships evolve, and
Yeah.
it's part of the learning as well.
Okay. So for people wanting to experience the delight and the pleasure of sampling Café Pod, how can they, what's the best way for them to access, buy your coffee,
check us out
enjoy it and give you feedback?
Absolutely. So if you come to our website, cafepod.com, you can check out our full range of coffees on there, whether you've got an espresso machine or you need just ground coffee or beans. We've got a great range on there. Try them out. Let us know what you think. If you hate it, tell us. If you love it, let us know, because only with that feedback can you make it better. We're also available in Waitrose, Tesco's, Ocado, and Amazon. So any one of those, you can also get all the products.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to probably go to a supermarket and buy some. I'm going to taste it. I'm going to sample it. I'm going to give you feedback, but I'm also going to buy it for my cousins.
Great.
And get their feedback as well. I might do it together. I'm actually excited to do it together when we're all together. And actually, because don't
tell them what it is. Just let them try.
Yeah.
See what they say.
Yeah, that's a good. I hadn't thought about that. That's what I'll do. I'll do it when we're all together, and then just say, "Got some new coffee. What do you think?" And I'll let you know.
Amazing.
So this has been amazing. I was excited to listen to your talk. I really enjoyed your talk, and to do this today is wonderful. Hopefully we can have many more conversations as your journey grows and develops. And so for people that maybe want to get in touch with you, so we've got the website. I will get that off your team, put up on the show notes, so we're good to go there.
Fantastic.
And then we have a recurring question on the podcast, which is, if you could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, they can be alive or past. Who would you invite?
So I got a couple of people that I've had to think about. I think the first one, Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, for what if you know his story and what he's done, is just incredible, because he saw something happening in Italy and he came back to the US and went, we can do something like this. And everybody was like, what are you talking about? And he willed it into existence to what it is today. And that just didn't happen by mistake. So very impressive. The second person, and he's down to earth and calls a spade, which is great. Second person is so being South African, rugby supporter, Springbok supporter. So the coach, Rassie Erasmus, I think he would be an amazing dinner guest. He definitely is straight talking, and I think has a unique perspective on people, teams, in a very down to earth way. And I think just the insights you get from him are just fascinating. To do what he's done over and over is pretty incredible. So I think that would be amazing. And then the last person I think would just make it pretty fascinating is a person by the name of Darren Brown, who is a entertainer / mentalist / I don't know. He understands people and how they think and how we see the world and psychology, and that fascinates me. And I think the more you get into brand, the more you realize it's all about what drives us, what makes us do what we do, what drives human behavior and decision making. And I think he's taken that and been able to demonstrate in incredible ways. And I think the discussion with those 3 people would be pretty insightful and entertaining.
Sounds amazing. And obviously you could have delightful coffee at the end at the end of the meal. That's taken care of. And so if I can sneak in one last question, we've gone over time. We've gone over time, but I'd just like to ask you this question. So for entrepreneurs out there that may be going through a difficult time at the moment, do you have a piece of advice that you'd like to leave for them?
Yes. Go and seek out other entrepreneurs. Go and talk to other people. because I've found is very, very helpful. Because if you think you've got problems, I found whenever you talk to other entrepreneurs and they tell you their problems, I always come away going, thank God that's not me. I thought I had problems. They've really got problems, and you actually put your problems into perspective. You're like, actually, my life's not that bad. So it's a bit of a trick of the mind, but putting things in perspective helps a lot. Getting out of your own bubble. So seek out other entrepreneurs. Ask them to help on your problems. You'd be surprised what people can help with.
Fabulous advice. So thank you so much. And so thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're always looking to grow this show. So please do tell everything you like and everything you don't like, and we're keen to provide content that really resonates with you. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button. We're keen to grow the channel, and your support really does help. And if you want to contact me, you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com or via the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.